Oh, look at the college football slate this weekend. Amanda's going to be at the first one. Air Force at Navy, CBS at noon Eastern time. We also
got big competition, though.
Yeah, well, that's true. Also at noon Eastern, this is where Brady and Danny will be. Penn State at Ohio State, and we also have Tennessee at Alabama at 3:30 Eastern time on CBS. Let's bring them in, and let's get some picks. We got Brady Quinn. Danny Kanell is back with us. You guys are both going to be at the biggest game of the week. We'll pick that in just a second. Let's start with the SEC game of the week. Alabama, now a 9.5-point favorite at home against Tennessee. Bama has not lost in conference play. Tennessee's only lost once this season.
Yeah, and Bama's so much better at home and Bryant-Denny. And this is not the same Tennessee team we saw last year where they made this a statement game for Hendon Hooker. They're averaging about 100 less yards per game. You look at the big plays, too, the plus 30-yard throws, things like that. That's just not what Joe Milton has been successful with this year. So their defense is better. But I think when you go and look at what's happened basically since the South Florida game where there's offensive struggles and Jalen Milroe will put back in the starting lineup the last 4 games, they've been phenomenal. They've really started to kind of find their flow running the football. Jalen Milroe giving him some progressions and things he feels comfortable doing here. So, look, I think this is going to be a tight game in the SEC, especially 4 straight weeks playing SEC opponents. I don't see Bama being able to cover this number, so I'm going to take the 9.5 points here. I do like the over, though. I think there'll be enough scoring to get over that number of 49 at this point. But don't get me wrong, Alabama wins the game, but Tennessee keeps this thing close because of their defense. There's some guys to worry about. Beasley, Pierce up front. Those guys can get after it, and Alabama's offensive line's had issues.
That's the difference to me is, yeah, they don't have Hendon Hooker in the offense that they had last year, but the good news is they didn't bring that defense this year either because their defense is actually getting after the quarterback. And Bama, I think they're closer. I still don't trust them the way you did when they had Tua or Mac Jones or even Jalen Hurts, where they would just typically blow out these type of opponents at home. They're still, even against Arkansas, they went up. It looked like they were completely taking control of the game. Jalen Milroe hit a couple big plays. That's the difference to me. I think he's really starting to get comfortable and flourish on the big chunk plays down the field. Him and Jermaine Burton have a really nice feel for each other, and Tommy Rees is starting to realize, you know what, dinking and dunking our way down the field is not the way to go, so they're taking more shots. So, but I don't think they hit on as many of them against this Tennessee defense. So I think it'll be an ugly game. And Bama's defense is legit, so I think they'll be able to slow down Milton and company. So I'm going with the under as well. But Tennessee in the 9.5 is my favorite play.
And to me, like you touched on the best point, I think everyone was looking for this offense just to hit the ground running. When you have a new coordinator, he's trying to figure out what his quarterback can do well. There's no preseason. You don't have any warm-up games necessarily. You're trying to figure that out as you go. And they're starting to get a better rhythm and feel for what Jalen Milroe can do down the field passing.
That game again, 3:30 Eastern on CBS, the SEC game of the week. All right, biggest game of the week, though, Penn State at Ohio State, as mentioned. Josh Pate's going to be there. Danny's going to be there. Brady's going to be there. I don't know. Are you going to be there?
No.
LeBron's probably going to be there.
That is true.
He came there last game for his son's official visit, for Bryce's official visit, I believe, at Ohio State.
Okay, so here's the thing. Ohio State, both of these teams undefeated. They beat Notre Dame, so sorry. Chris, for Penn State, their toughest opponent, no offense, has been Iowa.
And so they had no problem with Iowa.
Had no problem with Iowa. The line right now is Ohio State.
Okay.
You know,
it's nice that Penn State's finally playing somebody, and these teams in the Big Ten East are finally playing each other. This is what we
look. Everyone can knock schedules and who they've played, who they haven't played. We said that about Oklahoma before they played Texas, because Oklahoma didn't play anyone before Red River, and then they handled Texas, physically dominated them. But Penn State hasn't played anyone so far. Okay, they've dominated everyone they've played. Same thing can be said about Michigan. So these are the games that we get up for. These are the games that are ultimately going to decide the conference. And honestly, you can make the case this is an elimination game for either one of these teams, because if they lose, yeah, there's a chance you could still survive. But I don't think you want to have to come down to the tiebreaker in the Big Ten, when I think it goes to like the 6th tiebreaker, which is like common opponents within the conference to determine this thing. Here's going to be the biggest key. If it comes down to quarterback play, I think Drew Aller is the quarterback with the higher upside as far as playmaking ability and making a play. The difference, though, is we've already seen Kyle McCord step up in the big moment in South Bend versus Notre Dame to get his team a win. But this Penn State team matches up as well as anyone. The offensive line for Ohio State has really struggled this year. Adisa Isaac, as well as Chop Robinson, can absolutely get after it. And the secondary in Penn State can match up with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, as well as the rest of the wide receivers. So this one, to me, is going to be tight. That number sits at 4. It's come down a little bit. I'll take the 4 points in Penn State. I also like the over. I think there'll be a little more scoring in this one.
So you mentioned everything. I totally agree with. This feels like the first time in a while that Penn State has actually had some advantages. Like offensive line looks looks better. I'd say the defensive line looks better. Yeah. But I think in the one area, and Ohio State has some beat-up guys, right? You didn't see Travion Henderson. You didn't see Mayim Williams. You've seen Ibuka didn't play last week either. I think, and I'm counting on those guys to be healthy for this game. I think they'll be playing. So it comes down to the quarterback, I think. And I do agree with you. I think Kyle McCord has been tested. He's been through some adversity, even going back to week 1 against Indiana. It was kind of a sluggish game. He had to play his way out of it against Notre Dame. It was okay, and then he had the big drive down the field to win it. Drew Aller, we haven't seen him in that moment yet, and now it's on the road. And I also think Kyle McCord's mobility, not like you're going to confuse him for a Justin Fields or a pass quarterback that could run it around, but I think he's more mobile where if he does get under duress, he can escape. And I don't know if Aller can. He's a little bit more of a big-bodied traditional quarterback, and I'm curious to see how he does in this environment. And this is really his first test on the road. For that reason alone, I'm going to lean towards the Buckeyes and lay the 4.
I've got no doubts whatsoever about Drew Aller. I really don't. I think he reminds me of Big Ben as far as how he can move and hurt you with his legs. I'm curious of 2 things, though. In his case, they've been kind of dinking and dunking. Obviously, that became a viral moment there for James Franklin when asked about it. Are they saving it up for this game because they haven't had to play anyone for some of those deep shots? You know, you read some different articles, reports out there. Not a lot of teams feel threatened necessarily by the secondary for Ohio State. They maybe don't feel like they can match up quite as well as they used to. So do they bring out some of those shots for this matchup? And the last thing I'll say is, who ends up being the more physical team? That's been a topic of conversation, too, for Ohio State. I think this is one of those matchups, Big Ten football. You know Penn State wants to run the football. They're the best defense statistically right now in the Big Ten. Can they stop Ohio State from running the football? And who wins that battle up front?
I wonder what Lou Holtz has to say about it. Right. Who might be the more physical team this week. I'd like to know where that Lou Holtz
Ryan
is
Day would
right
love to get another clip from him. I'll tell you, get his team motivated.
Fire up his team. Let's go to a team that's ranked right in between Ohio State and Penn State. That's your Florida State Seminoles. It's a top 20 matchup. It just doesn't feel like that to me, though. I'm going to be here for the radio call for this game. Florida State, 2-touchdown favorite against Duke, but the problem is Duke, even if they do have Riley Leonard, he's not going to be anywhere near 100%. Didn't play last week.
Yeah, he didn't play last week, but Henry Beelan, the backup, comes in, and they basically just took a few shots.
He completed 4 passes.
4 passes, and 2 were touchdowns, and 1 was an interception. So there you go. That's the kind of stat line you're looking for. So clearly Duke's going to want to run the football. Jordan Waters obviously stands out a running back for them, had over 100 yards and a touchdown last week. But it's going to come down to Mike Elko on the defense. This is the #1 pass defense in the ACC. Can they slow down Jordan Travis to Keon Coleman, who maybe had the catch of the year last week? Johnny Wilson was out. He should be back for this one. So this number looks big. And I know it's in Tallahassee. That's a tough place to play. But talking to some of the folks at Notre Dame, they were shocked at how skilled Duke was on the perimeter and how much better they were, even on the interior, their defensive line. They really felt like that was one of the better teams that they had played. I think Florida State's going to be a little more challenged in this one, so I'll take the 14 points here, and I'll kind of rely on Elko to come up with some sort of game plan to hold things down.
Duke has a perception problem, and I think it works to their benefit because they sneak up on a lot of schools. Don't get it twisted. Like you said, they have athletes. I mean, they took it to Clemson, beat them. They had Notre Dame on the ropes and played with them like physically.
They could have won that game.
Absolutely. So they've matched with teams that have better brands, that have better athletes, and they've gone toe-to-toe with them. I think you'll see more of the same. I would maybe lean towards a lower scoring game. I didn't pick a side on this one, but if I'm going with that, like 14 points, like that's, hey, this is going to be a little bit of a shootout. Florida State scores at will. I don't think that'll be the case. I would like to, and they have their kind of, they haven't had a solid game start to finish since Syracuse. Before that, it was LSU. Then there was a lot of games where they just kind of played down to the competition or kind of let the other team hang around a little bit. I still want to see more from this defense. And I want to see more from Jordan Travis. Now, he's been banged up. He had the shoulder. Right. This past week, he left with a, for a few minutes with a hand injury. I want to see more from Jordan Travis. Until then, Mike Elko will have a game plan to take away some of those weapons that he has. So I'll take Duke in the points as well.
A lot of intriguing matchups on Saturday, including this next one. Utah at USC. Caleb Williams 0-2 against Utah in his career thus far. Of course, USC coming off that huge loss to Notre Dame. Danny, how do we see the Trojans respond at home in this one?
I am very curious where this team's psyche is. I don't know if I trust him in this scenario, especially with or without Cam Rising. It almost feels like Cam Rising's not going to play this year. Are you at that point? Like who cares? Like we talked about that. Like what does the line mean? I'll go ahead and take Utah. They have owned this team. Kyle Whittingham, you mentioned defense. This team has been more physical. It is still a physical sport, as we've been reminded several times throughout, especially with Notre Dame put on display against Caleb Williams and company. So I think they might bounce back and get the W, but I'm going to take those points with Utah.
With what I saw in the trenches last week, it's hard to think that USC is going to be able to cover this number. And as big as it is, I'm a bit surprised, but it is in Southern California. But I'll take the 6.5 points. Look, Utah is the more physical team, and Caleb Williams has struggled. Last week, pressure almost half the sacks, and you saw what happened, half his snaps throwing the football. 3 of those ended up being interceptions. They had 2 fumbles as well. Turnovers have even been an issue, and their defense hasn't been getting as many last year, which was the only thing that really was their saving grace, as bad as USC's defense has been. So this is a game where Utah runs the football, maybe a few shots on the perimeter, but outside of that, pressures and keep this thing a low-scoring game. I like the under on this one, and I'll take the 6.5 points as well.
Okay, we've got best bets to get to here. And Danny, you're going to the Big 12, which it's Oklahoma, it's Texas, and then 3 through 10 is like put anywhere.
Yeah.
And you got 2 of those teams playing. Oklahoma State at West Virginia. Oklahoma State is a 3.5-point dog.
Give me the Cowboys. Don't look now, but they're 4-2. And the one thing that they finally decided on is a quarterback. They were going with a 3-quarterback rotation, which I couldn't stand. I don't know how you find a rhythm. 4 series each. It cost them. They got blown out by South Alabama. Last 2 weeks, though, at home, sounds like they found some rhythm, found a quarterback. I think it travels. I like the Oklahoma State team to win outright.
It seems like Oklahoma State's building up towards that Bedlam matchup versus those Sooners. You never know. You don't want to count Mike Gundy out. I've got the under of Colorado State, UNLV. Barry Odom's done an unbelievable job with UNLV. Already equated to their win total from a year ago. They were 5-7. They're 5-1 right now, almost bowl eligible. And then you look at their tandem of backs, Davis and Thomas. They will slow down this game running the football. And CSU's defense has got a lot better. They were giving up 43 or more points the first couple of games. Now it's a little bit less than 30. So I think this is a little bit more of a battle between 2 teams trying to kind of find their way through this one. I like the under of 61.5. All
right, Brady Quinn and Danny Kanell agreeing on some picks here for college football this week. They both like Tennessee plus 9.5 at Alabama, Duke plus the 14 at Doak, and Utah plus 6.5 at USC.